It's an honor and a pleasure. What a joy to be here with you. I find it so invigorating to practice with folks all around the world. So, as Rebecca said, I'm joining from Israel. It is evening. We are just beginning into what is the 10th of Shvat, which means that, I'm talking to you from Israel, but I was in Boston and Minneapolis just a few days ago. And from there, to say that the first buds of spring are sprouting here sounds just hysterical, but they are. They are. So in that today, where you are, it's the 9th of Shvat still, but where I am, it's the 10th of Shvat, which means that Tu B'Shvat, the celebration of the trees and the very, very first buds of spring, is right around the bend. And I want to take that as our inspiration for our practice today. So as Rebecca said, in my day-to-day, I work as a hands-on healer, and the guide that I use in that work, the energetic map of the body that I use, is the Kabbalistic tree of life. And so I want to take as our inspiration today this phrase, tree of life. I think it's something that Etz Chaim. I think it's something that we take a little bit for granted in Judaism. If I say Etz Chaim Hi, she is a tree of life. For many of us, if you grew up in a singing Jewish context, or if you are a synagogue goer, if I say Etz Chaim Hi, then it might be the Torah that immediately comes to mind. Etz Chaim, also from the Garden of Eden, a powerful metaphor and incredible image that the Torah opens with, and the possibilities of what is it to start our story from a tree centered in a garden of paradise. And then, of course, the central metaphor in the Kabbalistic tradition is also known as the Etz Chaim, the tree of life. It is at once a picture of God and also, in a certain way, a picture of us. So I'll say that we're gonna practice today using the actual image of an actual tree, and we're going to get settled into our sit in just a moment or two. But the Kabbalistic imagery around tree of life, a wonderful new academic work by Yossi Chayes by that name, the Kabbalistic tree, just came out. I am still waiting to get my hands on my copy, but he's collected visuals and manuscripts that have not ever been pulled together before, and so that's a beautiful resource that I can recommend just from the rave reviews that it has received. But for us for today, I want you now to start to make your way. We're about to settle into meditation. And in a moment, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to do a contemplative practice today. We're going to sit, and I want to encourage you to use as a focal image the image of an actual tree. So knowing that we could have a class on Kabbalah where we could be talking about the Kabbalistic tree of life, and I could show you how that overlays on your body for today. And I think I'll share my screen now. This is just a beautiful artistic rendering of a tree of life. You have to forgive me. I don't know the artist who created this, but I love it. So begin to settle in. Take a comfortable seated position. If you're sitting on a chair, I want to encourage you to just rest your shoulder blades into the back of the chair. And maybe exhale just one time out an open mouth, sighing it out and feeling the weight settle down into the pelvic bowl. Now from this place, I want you to imagine that you have roots, and feel them sink down through your cushion, your chair, grounding. And as we settle into our sit, you can take a look at this tree of life image here on the screen, or you can close your eyes and call to mind the visual image of an actual tree. For my students who work with this image day in and day out, I really encourage them to have an actual tree in their life that they work with. It's beautiful to do this practice with your spine resting on the sturdy trunk of a tree. And if it's something that interests you, maybe next week you'll plant a sapling, or maybe you'll wait for the first buds of spring where you are located, where the ground is softened and no longer frozen, to plant a sapling and help it grow as a way of helping yourself to grow. So let's begin now to settle into our meditation practice. See in your mind's eye a physical tree. Inhaling deeply and calling to mind the dynamic give and take. That first human being who was breathed to life in the Garden of Eden. In that story, God exhales ruach chaim, the breath of life, and breathes soul into that ancient ancestor of ours. And in that same way, we exist in dynamic, reciprocal relationship with the trees that decorate planet Earth. I exhale and they inhale. They exhale and I inhale. Settling into your breath. Let the next inhalation invite the spine to be long and proud. Feel the center line of the body like a sturdy trunk. Netzachim is at once a tree and also a ladder linking heaven and earth. Sending down your lower roots deep into earth. Stretching out your upper branches well beyond the physical confines of your body. Letting them extend out into the ether. Feel yourself here to be a conduit between heaven and earth. And this is where I invite you to practice today. Allowing the sensation of breath to travel up and down your sturdy trunk. Inhaling nourishment from earth. Exhaling out to sky. And then you might play with drawing down from above as you inhale. Sending energy down below as you exhale. Should you notice the attention Gently coming back, feeling into your rootedness, feeling into the long corridor of your trunk. I hope you can hear that whisper behind me is the sound of the rain. Here in the Holy Lands coming to water our practice. Inhaling, we draw up sustenance from source. Exhaling as you offer out your breath back to source. We know now that forests are highly networked places. The roots of a tree plugged into a vast network like our own neural network. So you might begin to see yourself as part of a forest, stretching your roots down, feeling into a deep pulse of life, the vast interconnectedness of all living things on planet Earth. And as we move towards the close of our sit, I want to invite us to finish together with 5 very dynamic breaths to really charge up, to draw life force from this tree of life. So be sure that the image of the tree of life is clear in your mind's eye. Sink your roots deep and let's inhale very deeply, drawing up from the root, inhaling so much that you feel the collarbone expand. You feel the crown stretching up towards the sky. And let's exhale dynamically out an open mouth, sending out your exhale as an offering out into the world. Deeply inhaling. And as we close, I'll invite you to just place your hands on your heart. In our Jewish celebration of Tu B'Shvat, we will taste fruits as a way of celebrating the gift that is a planet in balance. So before we leave the space of our sits, I invite you to consider what buds, what fruit is ready to be born in you, acknowledging it, making space, inviting your blossoming. And as you're ready, you can gently let the eyelids flutter open. Thank you, everyone. It is so beautiful and powerful to practice with more than 200 people. I hope that wherever you are, you can begin to see the buds of spring. I also know that for me, as someone who cares a great deal about the planet and the planet in balance, and there is no doubt that that she needs our love. Mother Earth needs our love. And yet, I can tell you that the shkedia, the almond blossoms, are peeking out right on schedule here in Israel. So some things are sturdy, 2,000-year-old sturdy. So I think with that, I will hand it back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Sara, for that beautiful practice and for that beautiful image of the blossoms in the Holy Land. So we seal this beautiful practice with the opportunity for any of you who are in mourning or observing a yort site, if it is your practice to participate in Kaddish, to do so. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, you're invited to stay present and offer your compassion and love to those who are in mourning. If you are observing Kaddish, you're welcome to put the names of anyone you are remembering in the chat. I invite Jet to share the words of Kaddish on our screen. And if you are reciting Kaddish, you're welcome to unmute yourself and join me in body or in spirit as we rise to recite these words together. Yitzgadal,
Gadal
v'yitkadash,
v'yitkadash
v'nei
b'nei Rabba,
Yibrach,
v'yimad Yibrach,
v'yitei
v'yitei v'yishma, v'yimachai v'yimach, v'yimachai v'yimach, v'yimach, Rabba v'yimach, Rabba v'yimach, Rabba v'yimach, Ram v'yitkadash,
Amen.
Thank you again, Sara, for that beautiful teaching. Before we close, Jet, if you could share again in the chat box the link to our website, where if you are so moved or able, you can make a donation in support of this work of IJS. We are so grateful for your support, and to all of you for helping to create this beautiful, beautiful community of practice every day. So for those who are leaving now, we wish you good health and shalom. We hope to see you again tomorrow at the same time. And those of you who would like are welcome to stay on here to ask Rabbi Sara any questions or to share your reflection on today's meditation experience. So if you have any questions for Sara, you're welcome to share them in the chat. And we'll stay on until 1:30 for a conversation on today's teaching practice.
Yes, I have to articulate my apology again. I don't know who created that beautiful image. So I just tell everybody whenever I share it in this way that I wish I knew the artist, but I don't know.
It's certainly enjoyed looking at it.
If any of you know, let me know.
Well, thanks so much again, Sara, for that gorgeous practice. I found it to be so simple in a way, but also so powerful. And I wonder, just to start off our conversation, I wonder if you could share a little bit more about the tree of life, the way that you work with it, and how it might be something helpful or useful for us to explore in our own journeys with contemplative practice and Jewish mindfulness.
Yeah, my pleasure. So on the most basic level, I work with not the image of a real living tree that we use today, but the Kabbalistic tree of life, which looks like looks like one of those ditties with all the circles, right? With the circles that we name Sfirot. And it's a really powerful way of working with the body and working with healing. And yet, and I'll say maybe another sentence or two about that in a minute. And yet, even though I work with the Kabbalistic tree of life with it, which is an energetic map, I'm constantly just, I just find it like I get such a kick out of how awesome and powerful it is to work with the actual image of an actual tree of life. And every time I forget for a moment that the naming that the Kabbalists gave to this dynamic picture, which is both our image and God's image, that they called it a tree. And then I remember, oh yes, it's a tree, it's a tree too. And that is just so right on, because real trees in nature, first of all, we are learning more and more and more about the wisdom that they carry. And so I'll give another book recommendation. The novel, The Overstory, has become my all-time favorite work of fiction. And so that's just a recommendation for a deep exploration into really what is the profound wisdom that trees are holding for us. And fundamentally, trees can't help but stretch towards the sun. They don't struggle with ego in the ways that we do. They grow without apology. And I find it really powerful in my work with folks that my experience of being a human being is that all of us, really everything on planet Earth is always either growing or dying. And I think that trees hold that truth and they hold that balance really powerfully. So there's just this beautiful embracing of shedding what needs to go when it's time to go, and adding layers and keeping growing. So that's about real trees. In terms of the Kabbalistic tree of life as an energetic map, what I'll say about it is that my own training is from east and west, and so even that image that I just held up, it might look to you like a map of the chakras if you know the chakra system. And the reason that I like working with the Kabbalistic tree of life even more than I like working with the chakras, although I do work with the chakras too, they're the same thing. The template's the same. The body's the body, right? But the chakra system offers us, basically, because we were just working with that image of the trunk, the chakra system is all down the center line. And so it offers us the dynamics in their expression as unity. But part of the fundamental nature of the earth plane is this duality and our persistence towards seeing in binary and bifurcation. And this is what Genesis is playing with it when it offers us this image of the tree of life in Genesis. Genesis 1 is, separate, 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 separate. And Genesis 2 is no, stop, garden, tree at the center, right? And so using the Kabbalistic tree of life as an energetic map of the body, it gives us that dynamic tension of sometimes things pull apart and they come back together, and they pull apart and come back together. And that's the dance. That's the dance we're all always doing.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's so much to think about there. I'm also curious if you could share, Sara. I know that you shared a little bit about the work that you currently do, helping people connect to their vitality. And I know just from our personal conversations that you really spend most of your time these days working one-on-one with folks and really taking an deeply embodied and hands-on approach to healing and to spirituality. And I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit more about what led you to really focusing on that in your life and how you see the place of the body in this work of evolving and spiritual exploration and healing.
Because it's you asking me that question, I can't help but answer it through the personal. So I'm going to get quiet after this call and ask myself, do I want to answer that way? So Rebecca and I know each other through the beautiful work of Or Halev, an amazing Jewish organization that works in collaboration with IJS and creates the space for deep, extended meditation practice. And when I was working for Halev, I found myself all the time in conversations with folks where I would say, at the end of retreat, you will feel better than a week at the spa. But the truth was, any given particular moment of retreat didn't feel so much like a day at the spa, because extended meditation practice is hard work and painful work. And for me, I think that the body offers us all kinds of challenges, but I think fundamentally the reason that God chose to give us this particular spacesuit for our soul is because the body is what allows us to feel the world and to touch the world, to come into direct contact through sense perception. And that is hard. It gives us, for example, addiction. That's true. But it also gives us like the yum, just the yum. And I wanted to find a way to keep deepening and keep coaching folks on deepening and on awakening with a little bit more of the yum. And so I happen to, all of my serious students know that they have to practice mindfulness. I do a 10-minute daily sit every day. So there is, one has to learn to be with what is through basic mindfulness practice. But when I get to be hands-on with someone, there's a dimension of it that's also massage, plain old straight Swedish massage, because that's healing in and of itself, And so it's about an embrace of the body.
Beautiful. I love that you're bringing in the yum. It reminds me of how also in this month of Shvat, and as we approach Tu B'Shvat, the tikkun of this month, like the place where we really have the opportunity for extra mindfulness and consciousness that could potentially even really be healing, is with how we relate to food. right? That's kind of what we're invited to focus on this month and can be a part of that observance of Tu B'Shvat as well.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
mindful eating practice. Absolutely.
Totally. So Laura asked an interesting question. She says, can you describe the feeling of what spiritual healing is like when it works? Any thoughts on spiritual healing? What does spiritual healing mean to you, Sara?
Yeah, Laura, thank you. It's a beautiful question. So because I work as a hands-on healer, I really resist any distinction between body and soul. And that kind of Gnostic tendency of body over here and soul over here, we have it also all over Judaism. And I place myself with a voice that's on the other side of that, which also we have all over Judaism and in the Kabbalistic tradition, which is that the soul creates the body. And I would say that the soul creates the body for our learning. And so along those lines, spiritual healing feels like healing. And the way that I know we're on the right track when I work with clients is that I want people to feel alive. The Sfat Emet says that when you feel yourself filled with life force, then you know you are on the path that God wants you to be on. And so spiritual healing feels like healing. And then another way we can think of the Kabbalistic tree of life is as a map of the layers of us. And that's certainly how lots of Kabbalistic treaties offer it to us. And if you have in your possession kind of those complicated maps of the tree of life, you might see that it's labeled out for you of the physical, the emotional, the mental, the astral, right? And I find that to be really true with folks. And so almost in from a psychological standpoint, hierarchy of needs. So too with all of us, that, if you can't sleep, and or if your relationship with food is far more contentious than one of self-love, or if you don't have basic release practices that feel good, so digesting kind of release and also laughing and crying and that kind of thing. If those basic things aren't happening, then you're not pulsing with life. And then when we get those things working, then we go up a level. And the same thing too, if we're in deep emotional conflict, then we're not pulsing with life. So back to that image of the tree, the real tree, I see us all fundamentally as vessels. We're just meant to be vessels flowing with life force, and it's all supposed to flow free. But because we're human, because we're here, it means that we're not flowing completely free just yet. And so then the body gives us the chance to okay, where are things getting stuck? Why are they getting stuck there? And those become our growing edges, our healing edges that we then shift. So I hope that answers a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sara. I love what you just named also around kind of distinguishing what is really a native Jewish approach to the relationship between the body and soul from these more Gnostic or Cartesian ways of placing mind over matter, right? And the intellect kind of lording over the body. And I loved what you said about that hierarchy of needs, that it really starts in the body, right? And that's what, if we can nourish the body, that is what's going to help us to become more available to nourishment in the heart, nourishment in the mind and the soul. And I wonder just want to name that it's also not easy. We don't necessarily live in a culture that is encouraging us to, in the Western world, that is encouraging us to really to prioritize and care for the body and have that loving and compassionate relationship to our own bodies. I know it's a place where folks often actually have potentially a lot of judgment or a lot of pain. And I just wonder if you could would you be willing to share any tips or suggestions for folks who are curious just to begin to relate to the body with a little bit more care, with a little bit more compassion, with a little bit more listening and honoring? Do you have any practices, any tips, any suggestions just for kind of starting that journey?
Well, I'll say awakenbody.org is full of tips and practices and suggestions. So you can check that out, and lots of videos and all that kind of stuff. But so, when you say that our modern culture doesn't incline us so much in that direction. I think you're right in so many ways, and kind of the obvious ways are sort of like the commodification of body and marketing culture and all that kind of stuff. But I also think equally, especially standing still in the shadow of global pandemic, and also sort of a consequence to a negative side effect of the gifts that modern science has given us. Both of those things. The pandemic we got so scared, and we got so scared in our bodies. So that was very distancing for so many of us. And I believe that we were already in an epidemic of anxiety and depression before the pandemic. But if we weren't already, then we are now. And then a skill that I really focus on at Awakened Body, and I think this is my answer to your question. So I call what I do with folks deep body listening. And it comes from the conviction the body is the keeper of tremendous wisdom. We just need to practice listening. And so that's where I would suggest folks begin. And so when I reference like a byproduct of science, on one hand, I myself live with a Jewish genetic disease. And if it weren't for modern medicine, the condition would be fatal, and it's not at all fatal. Thank you, science, full stop. And yet we are growing up at a time where we're given the message that if we want to know something about our body, we should go to a doctor and take a test. And the doctor's intuitive knowing is very minimized, and our own knowledge about ourselves is very minimized. And I think that's a big mistake. I think that we can be our most loyal witness to what's alive in us and what's getting stuck in us, and that is really important for our own health and wellness and vitality. And so that's where I would say to begin, that if you can, and for some of us it needs to be, nowhere near a mirror, but if you can, just from a deep internal felt sense, to begin to give your body the gift of your attention, and just see what it has to say by way of thanks.
Well, that is such a beautiful place to end. I love what you said as the name of your work, deep body listening. I want to write that phrase down just as a reminder to have the mirror on my desk. Beautiful invitation to leave us with. So thank you so much again, Sara, for joining us. And thank you to everyone for being here today, for your practice, for your presence, and for being part of this beautiful community. Hope to see you tomorrow.